Hey guys, and welcome to our monthly live hangout here on our Twitch channel. My name is Jason,
And I'm Nick.
and we are the Movie Club Emporium, and this is our monthly live Twitch stream. And you're in for a treat tonight because we are talking about John Carpenter's Apocalypse Trilogy. Now, what's funny is Nick uh, forever ago, it feels like, had a podcast where you guys covered the Apocalypse trilogy.
Yes.
And
This would
then,
have been like 13 or 14 years ago. We covered this.
and so then about 5 years ago, separately, Amber, off camera Amber, and I had a podcast where we covered the Apocalypse trilogy. And yet, in all this time, Nick and I have never really sat down and formally discussed John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, which of course consists of The Thing, Prince of Darkness, and In the Mouth of Madness, in case you don't know. Uh, so it's going to be a lot of fun talking about these kind of definitive, not only definitive John Carpenter movies, because I think we can all agree like these are S tier Carpenter, and for the most part. We also have a bonus review because I have a theory I'd like to submit for your approval. And it's just going to be a lot of fun talking about movies that we've seen a bunch together and separately and have some fun chats with that and you along the way. So, with that being said, hello. Uh, so, that's right. Like I said, we do this once a month here on our Twitch channel. If you joined us last month, you were in for a whopper of an episode because we did almost 3 hours covering the entire Crow franchise, from comic book to Skarsgård remake and everything in between. Both the good, the bad, and the surprisingly enjoyable.
Yes.
I believe that is still up on our page, as well as our August live stream, where we talked about some wild and weird back to school movies. But for the spooky season as it is, we thought we would cover, I want to say, and I feel like I could confidently say, collectively our favorite director.
Oh, easily.
Yeah, it's,
Um, I have a long history of loving John Carpenter movies. Growing up in the 90s, John Carpenter movies played on loop on cable, especially the first one I ever saw was Big Trouble in Little China, which I love it. John Carpenter movies fill several spots on my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Uh, for our generation and the generation before us, he was one of the most iconic directors of horror movies, action movies, cult films, and he directed so many absolute bangers. It's I would struggle to think who's even number two behind John Carpenter for me, just because I love his body of work so much.
yeah, I mean, you could do a whole just a Carpenter episode because if you look at from 78 to 95, most people say with 95, that run, barring maybe a misstep in there too. I think we all know which one we're talking about. We're looking at you, Chevy Chase. But that run, man, was just insane. And even the stuff he did
It,
after that, there's some of that stuff that I hold up on the same pedestal as some of the Carpenter greats.
I that's the thing. Even when he didn't absolutely knock it out of the ballpark, um, I will admit, I don't believe I've not seen The Ward, which was his most recent movie. Aside from that, every Carpenter movie I've seen, I have enjoyed.
Yeah.
For varying degrees of good. Some are way better than others, but he doesn't make boring movies. He makes very entertaining, watchable, interesting movies with some killer soundtracks.
Yeah, I watched the award when it came out. I remember it coming out and being like, "This is John Carpenter's first new film," and however long it had been, I don't remember much of it. Um, but I remember seeing being like, "Okay, that's fine. He can still be John Carpenter." And then it was kind of, and then when they announced that TV show on Peacock, where they're like, "This is John Carpenter's like Suburban Nightmares," and like he directed episodes. I was like, "Oh, what is it? Like a creep show type situation with John Carpenter?" And they're like, "No, it's just like Dateline, and Carpenter directed some episodes from his couch by a Zoom." And you're like, "Oh,
People with creepy neighbors.
yeah." He
Oh, yeah,
still
still an
has the
okay
stroke to get
show.
his name on top of it though, so there's that. All right, so yeah, like I said, we do this once a month. If you're going, well, guys, that's fun and good, and I love this stuff, but that's just not nearly long enough. We want to make sure and let you know that we are also over on YouTube over at the Movie Club Emporium, and we have weekly reviews that go up. And in fact, right now we are directly in the middle of our Halloween horror month, where we are doing uh, anthology films. We've got one more to go, which I'll plug at the end of this live here. But yeah, we've got monthly review or weekly reviews over there every week, every Sunday at 4 p.m. Central Time. Those reviews go up, so make sure you check those out as well. And if you come in late to one of these live streams, those live streams are up there. They go up a little later though, so you want to make sure you're here live to see them as they happen. And all the flubs, because sometimes if there's a huge flub, like say, I don't know, Nick wets himself, I'm going to cut that out. And so you're not going to see that live and in person. That certainly did not happen on our Crow episode where Nick wet himself. No, I'm kidding.
There may or may not be occasional nip slips
Yeah.
or graphic violence against our own selves, adult situations.
Yeah.
You don't know unless you show up for these.
Teen smoking sometimes occurs. Like it gets wild here.
Off the chain, as the kids say these days. It's lit.
That's right. It's totally bussin' over here, guys.
Straight bussin', no cap.
Right on
So if
God.
you want to see more middle-aged men on the internet trying to talk like younger people and talking about movies, you're in the right place.
Because the internet needs more of this. More
Yes.
guys, middle-aged men talking movies. But have all of them been friends for 30 years? I don't think so. So that's fun. I did. If you can tell, if you do follow us, I'm looking a little uh unkempt. I wanted to try to get as much of a McCready beard as I could get in a month. So if I look a little wild and untamed, it's because I wanted that. Of course, nobody gets Kurt Russell beard but Kurt Russell. But I just want you to know, if you're like, man, Jason's looking really, really worse for wear, it's because I was trying to get that McCready growth going on.
I should have got you the McCready hat too. I wish I would have known.
I know now. I feel like since you've like raised the bar with like crow makeup, I feel like we have to dress up for these.
Yeah, that's definitely happening more in the future. I quite enjoy that.
I mean, if you still have some of that crow makeup, you can give yourself some Sam Neill face crosses. I mean, we got time.
I molded over. I thought about putting crosses on my face. I just thought that might. I'm not joking. I thought about it, but it's like that might get us attention for the wrong reasons, and all of a sudden we're on the news for being sacrilegious and talking about satanic movies. So it's like we're in the midst of another satanic panic. So I digressed. So
Yeah,
no,
fair
no
enough.
crosses all over my face. Oh well.
Fair enough. I just imagine some casual viewer scrolling in. What the?
What the hell are they even talking about? We don't know what we're talking about half the time. We don't plan this. We just got on here and talked to each other as we've been doing. Just talk about movies as we've
Yeah.
been doing for 30 years now.
So again, make sure you check those out every week. Let's grow that YouTube because if we get enough stroke over there, we can dual stream here and there, and that would be cool to
Yes.
up our game a bit. But with that being said, we're gonna get into John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy. Now, you may be asking yourself, Jason, these movies weren't made in connection to one another. Why are they a trilogy? Well, they're actually named the Apocalypse trilogy for two reasons. One, fans named them that. John Carpenter didn't name them that. So what I have, or here's a little history. It's a small, brief history. The Apocalypse trilogy is consistent of three films from director John Carpenter over a 12-year period, from 1982 to 1994 is when he made. So 95, I guess, is when it actually came out. They are actually not linked beyond their tone, each movie kind of falls into a place in Carpenter's career where there's kind of a turning point, and you definitely feel his tones during that time of his career reflect in these movies. And the theme of people coming face to face with a cosmic horror-like entity that could destroy the world. And that's the most simple way I could think of explaining the Apocalypse trilogy. But it all started, of course, John Carpenter, creator of Halloween. He comes out with Halloween. That movie, you know, basically does what it does. His follow up to that was The Fog and then Escape from New York, both of which are true bangers. And then we get this movie here, 1982's The Theme. The Theme.
A
Lord. See that?
theme.
That part's saying it. I'm not cutting it out. Don't worry. You'll see it on both formats. The Thing. Written this screenplay by Bill Lancaster and John Carpenter, based on the John W. Campbell novella Who Goes There. And of course, there was the 1950s?
Yeah, I believe it's made in 1951 or 53. 1951.
Okay. Howard Hawks film The Thing from Another World, which is based on that same story. And I will let Nick take over from there.
Yes, as Jason mentioned, this is a very interesting adaptation of a very popular novella from the 30s. So, a little bit of backstory. The Thing from Another World dropped in 1951. And in its own right, it's actually a really great movie. It's a great horror movie from that era, the claustrophobic setting. Unfortunately, they were limited by the technology available to properly execute the story. So for the creature, they had to go for a different direction in the 1951 version because they just didn't have the means to convincingly portray the ever evolving and changing form of this thing, this alien life form. Well, fast forward 30 years and practical effects had gotten drastically better. So, with that nice fat budget from the studio and a fairly large cast, John Carpenter was given the job of remaking the thing. So you have this beloved 1950s horror sci-fi movie, and you have a director who's, I mean, John Carpenter, early 80s, hot commodity at this point, having put out Assault on Precinct 13 and Halloween was such a critical darling. I mean, even Siskel and Ebert were heaping praise upon it. Um, which I'll swing back around to the critical response to this movie in a little while. So the plot concerns there's an Antarctic research outpost, and a I say remote Antarctica. It's even remote by Antarctica standards. It's all of Antarctica is remote, but uh, it's a long way from anything else aside from other scientific camps. You have this uh, group of people down there who are scientists, researchers, and support staff there to help run this camp. One day, and this at the very beginning of the movie, this movie starts off with a bang. A dog comes running into camp and is being pursued by two Norwegians in a helicopter who are desperately trying to kill this dog. Both the Norwegians end up dying before they can accomplish this task. So all these this research team is mystified as to what exactly is happening and why these Norwegians were trying so hard to kill a dog and it ended up costing them their life. Well, they discover to their horror that the Norwegians found something buried in the ice, an alien craft that's been sitting there for at least 100,000 years. The original occupant of this craft has gotten loose. And what's worse is it's an absolutely terrifying life form that can mimic perfectly living organisms. Now, this thing is loose in the camp, and distrust runs high, and they're a long ways away from help, and they have to figure out how to deal with this issue and the potentially apocalyptic problems that come with it. And boils down to who can you trust, who's who they say they are, what do we do about it? How do we handle this insane situation in the absolute most desolate place on earth? This movie is, and that's it in a nutshell. It's one of those. There's a lot more to it, but shape-shifting alien loose in an Arctic research station. Seeing it how it unfolds, seeing how the people react, seeing the practical effects, this movie is a sight to behold. I'll let you get in a few words, Jason, because I could just sit here babbling on for a long time.
No, you're good. Yeah. I know, and I know that one day for sure we are going to do a Carpenter episode. Um, I guess I could say spoilers for that eventual episode. I think this is Carpenter's masterpiece. I think this is his best film. I know a lot of people go with Halloween because of what it created. I think this is Zenith Carpenter. Um, there's so much about this movie you can get into, which we'll get into, like, the story as we're going, but like just from a filmmaking standpoint, this movie comes out. He gets this movie right at the perfect time. He's just riding this wave of hits that he's able to get to spend the money for what miracles Rob Bottin creates, and how he is essentially like reinvents the special effects genre in movies at the young, like he's like 21 years old when he creates probably the greatest special effect makeup monster effects ever. Again, I know people go, American Werewolf in London. It's fantastic. It was the first big one. But to me, this is if you want to know what special makeup effects can do, it's this movie. And even all these years later, like I can't even imagine seeing something like this in 19. Can you imagine like sitting in a theater in 1982, having never seen anything remotely like this, and seeing those effects? Because I tell you right, even now, remastered and 40 plus years old, they look just as good now, if not better than they did back then. Um, to me, what is best in this movie, besides all of that, besides Dean Cundy's phenomenal cinematography, uh, besides all to get these 12 guys who are all just perfect for their each role, is the little things that Carpenter sets up before the movie even before you even get into the stuff. And what I mean by that is like when we see these guys at the camp, we're getting pieces of we're getting introduced with them without having to be like it's not a Suicide Squad. Here's Gary. He likes rules. He doesn't like windows. You know, he does. It's not that. But you are getting these guys, and you're to me anyway. It feels like you're getting these guys. Like you said, they're in the most remote part of the world. The remote from the remote part of the world. You feel like as if however long they were supposed to be there, they've been there like 2 weeks longer than they should have. Like you just feel like this kind of rising cabin fever in them. You know, the part where I think it's is it Palmer and Childs are like laying in bed, smoking a J, watching like game shows on tape, and he gets all frustrated. He's like, "I've seen how this one ends." You know, you feel like they've just been there too long. They've been around each other too long at this point, ready for that break. You know, Kurt Russell's going around destroying every computer he comes in contact with. Um, it just you just feel immediate tension, and then you compound everything else on top of that tension. So you are tense around all these guys. You've got this cabin fever already set in, and now I'm throwing paranoia and superstition and like all the all this so extra stuff on top of it. It just makes this movie almost unbreathable. Like you just parts of this movie you watch and like you the the tension between all of these men is so thick like you almost hold your breath between so much of this stuff. And then of course you get into what are incredible stuff with Rob Bottin, you know, the stuff with the dog cage. Um, you know, Amber and I remember doing that podcast and talking about like one of the most harrowing parts of this movie is not what you see on the screen, which this movie is able to show you so much. To me, the most terrifying part of this movie is in the dog kennel when you're just hearing the noises of the thing and you see the one dog trying to chew through the wire to get out of the dog kennel. That's horrifying filmmaking. Like that's scary. Cause you don't even if you never showed me what that thing turns into, just that image of a dog chewing through a wire fence to get away from whatever it is, that's horror. Um, and then to have so much of it, and, you know, it does take place at night and in these little rooms, but then you get so much in the snow and the white, and again to have all this, the idea of having all these 12 guys, they're all just dudes in part big coats, and yet you know who everybody is, you know where everybody is. And so as you're watching the movie and more are being revealed as the thing, in your mind you're going, no, when did it get him? When did it get him? If it got him then and I didn't know it, and then you become just as paranoid watching the movie as the guys in the movie. It's a perfect film. This is a perfect. I don't even say perfect remake. This is a perfect film. Like there are no to me there are no holes, no anything. This movie does everything that people gravitate to movies for. It's just a perfect film. We'll get into specifics, but I'll stop gushing for a minute, Nick, to let you chime in here real quick.
If you want to see how to make a horror film, you can watch this movie. If you want to see how to make a compelling science fiction film, it's this movie. If you want to see how to make a masterpiece of a thriller, it's this movie. It manages to blend three different genres into one seamlessly of tense and horrifying and the implications of this creature from another world. Uh, it has one of the most terrifying pictures. It's like there's a scene involving a 1982 computer running a simulation that is utterly terrifying because there comes a moment where you realize how big the stakes are here. Um, that it's not just a matter of what happens to the men of this research station, which is horrifying enough. It's what happens if it makes it out of there. What happens if it gets back to a populated area? And the repercussions of that are so massive it drives one of the characters insane because it breaks his brain realizing how dire the situation is. And meanwhile, all these various characters, they're trying to put together the pieces of this and figure out what exactly they're dealing with, because you kind of go along with them as they get an idea of what happened. They go back and check out this Norwegian camp, and the things they find there, the clues are baffling. It's twisted and distorted bodies that are burned, but look human, but not quite human. People who had killed themselves in gruesome ways. Buildings being destroyed and torched, and this mysterious block of ice that's had something carved out of it. You feel how terrifying it would be for them to be there to witness the things they have, to see this scene unfold with these Norwegian helicopter pilots chasing this dog, then going back to the camp and seeing just how incredibly bizarre the entire setting of the camp is, and how the whole scene that's been left behind, it just reasonably makes no sense. And they have to come to terms with the fact they are dealing with an unprecedented situation, and they are at the center of it. They don't know how to deal with it. They're trying to figure out how they can fight it, how they can thwart it, how they can see who's been infected by this thing and who hasn't. That tension, that atmosphere, that dread is so palpable from the first scene until the ending credits, every step of the way.
Yeah, and then just like something as simple as you have McCready, like by him being Kurt Russell, you kind of in your mind for the until it actually happens, you kind of he's your main character because he's Kurt Russell. The scene where he's like cheating bitch. He breaks the computer. He's swarmy. He's kind of cool. But then he becomes kind of the de facto guy. But then even again, you're watching it. There's as much as you want to be like, yeah, you better let him in. There is that part that's like, do we let him in? And then my favorite part about as this being a Kurt Russell hero, quote unquote hero, is you have that moment at the end. We finally see the thing and it's in its final form. The Blair monster, and it being Kurt Russell. You think of like movies like Aliens or whatever, where you get that big like hero versus monster standoff moment, and it's just Kurt Russell going, yeah, well, fuck you, and throws dynamite at it. Because what else do you say that there's a giant otherworldly monster stare you in the face, and you know that the only thing you can do is try to make it go back to sleep. Like, knowing that they can't even kill it, really, all they can do is take away its hiding places. And that moment, at the end there I know John Carpenter says he knows if anybody is the thing or not. And of course, you can be Team Childs, you can be Team McCready. It doesn't matter. It's just, he has that moment where the lights die. He's just like, let's just sit here and let's just sit here a minute and we'll figure it out. And knowing that it's not really resolved. And of course, you have things like the comics that continued it on. I never read any of those. I remember the video game. I had it on the original Xbox. I do want to replay it because it's getting remastered. I remember it being hard as balls.
Great.
Toward the end, we'll get into the thing. But I do want to talk about that we'll touch on it at the end. But like you were saying, like this the stuff where Blair is running the simulations, and it's just telling you like it would be like 3 years, and if that, and the world's done. Like once it hits,
When it gets back to, if it gets back to civilization, you have 27,000 hours before every
yeah,
human on Earth has been assimilated by this organism. And it's whenever you could see what this can do, how it can imitate people, and the various utterly mind melting forms it takes, it's just terrifying. You think of this getting loose in a city and just everybody being consumed and assimilated into this thing until it's all that's left. One of the most terrifying aliens ever put on film. Some might argue the most terrifying.
yeah,
And it's like have somebody you know and trust. In fact, be an alien monster that all of a sudden, and that's the thing, when it gets uncovered in the movie, and when they figure out who it's hiding in, it comes out in force in the most crazy, gory, frightening ways possible. Of just of just teeth and tentacles and heads and eyeballs coming out in all manner of horrifying and unnatural ways. It's that's one of all the different forms it takes because of how much it can alter its appearance, taking in other, it's like different people and different animals. It doesn't ever look the same twice. And so many of them are just creepy or unsettling in the unnatural way they move. Man,
and the idea that every cell of it is its own thing that will try to survive no matter what. Even the slightest drop of blood of it that it is latched onto is its own thing compared to the whole host of it. So no matter what you do, it's still going to be coming. You cannot stop it, and that even before then, that it's so of course, no, in the '80s, this movie was looked at as kind of an allegory for things that were going on health wise in the '80s. With the rise of AIDS in a 2024 type world, you could look at it at a very different way now with what we've been through. And to me, on top of all that, and probably the as sad and as scary as it is to think about with this movie, to me, it's the line when McCready gives his like final testament to the tape recorder. Nobody trusts anybody anymore, and we're all very tired. Like that is, at that point, that no matter the outcome or no matter what they do, this movie does not have a happy ending. And in a way, it kind of has the happiest ending of this trilogy of films, but that it's not going to end well for our guys down at the Outpost. But now I kind of want to get into like the specific filmmakings of it. Number one, Dean Cundey is the goat when it comes to, because all the stuff he did with Carpenter, all the movies he shot with Carpenter, the stuff he went on and did afterward. To me, what I love with his filmmaking is you never once don't know where you are. And so much of these long, steady shots of the hallway and doorways, and the scene where the dog is first, it's just walking around untethered. Number one, one of the best dog actors in the history of dog acting. You're just watching this dog just bounce room to room. There's just shadows on the wall. All that is so like calm and yet claustrophobic and unsettling. And then when you get into how frantic things are, with whether it is in the dog kennel or during the heart attack scene in the lab, or the stuff with the really scary stuff with like Fuchs in the dark, or the scene, the one I always think of, the one that like is like so like, oh, to me is, and spoilers for this movie, it's made from 1982. We'll get into spoilers, but the death of Gary, just that moment of just Blair behind him and just grabbing putting his hands through his face. Um, like so much of this movie is so still and quiet and moving, and then when it does get frenetic, it's it's just great, great cinematography. And then we have to talk about the music, because most of these movies, yes, we're going to be talking about how incredible John Carpenter is as a musician. That is without a doubt. But for this score, and you will forget if you don't know, this isn't a John Carpenter score. It's Ennio Morricone, the guy who did Once Upon a Time in the Old West, did the Good and the Bad and the Ugly, like amazing film scores. And when you hear this music, it just screams John Carpenter. Like you would know this isn't a John Carpenter score. But to be like, no, it's actually not only is it's not one of the great composer scores. It's actually one of another great composer's incredible filmography. Um, and again, just the filmmaking, whether it's the practical effects, the fact that they were able to film the entire movie on a refrigerated set, so that in this movie, it's not a bunch of guys walking around in big coats on, like potato flakes, knowing that they're just sweating their asses off. It's like they're really freezing to death on these sets. And then the stuff that they filmed up, I believe it's Alaska where they filmed on the glacier. Like, so you actually,
Yes.
it feels, I'll say Antarctica, but the landscape itself is alien. Because just all the snow and the ice and everything, and then when you see, how deep the ice is, that shot where they see the spaceship and that beautiful matte painting of the spaceship under the ice, and then just to the side of it's that like grave-sized block missing, right next to where they find the spaceship, is just incredible. And what's funny, I think, is much like the Predator, much like Predator, blink and you'll forget that there's a spaceship at the very beginning of this movie.
Yes.
Because you automatically just think of those credits, and of course the credits of the words the thing burning into the atmosphere is incredible. But yeah, you'll forget that there's totally a spaceship at the beginning of this movie. Again, just all around, from tone to everything about this movie is the perfect way to do whatever type of film you're making. This movie has how you do it the best. It's just incredible.
This is for me a 5 out of 5, a 10 out of 10, and I agree. Uh, John Carpenter's best work, and that's really saying something, giving the sheer volume of amazing movies he has given us. This one manages to combine all the ingredients into such an amazing end result. Uh, every time I watch it, it's one of those you can watch it multiple times and catch more details. This time around, I was really watching it to see, okay, at what point could this character become infected? And at the end of the day, we don't. A lot of it we don't know, but it invites repeat viewings. And if I mean, man, if you like any of the movies in that genre, this one's an absolutely awesome. Which is why I find it pretty baffling, as this movie flopped in 1982, and it was ravaged by critics. Um, except for Gene Siskel. I went back and watched the Siskel and Ebert review for all three of these movies, and Gene Siskel didn't like how gruesome it was, but he appreciated a lot of what this movie had to offer, while Roger Ebert just absolutely savaged it. And his take on this movie is one of his more infamous misses with his reviews, because while it wasn't recognized for its greatness in 1982 in a home video, it got a second life, and it is now widely regarded as a classic of horror and science fiction and thrillers, especially of the era. And I'm glad it has because it deserves every ounce of praise it gets. Sing, we could talk for 2 hours just about this movie and probably
Yeah.
come back and do a sequel where we talk about this movie for 2 more hours. It's so good. There's so much greatness seeping out of every pore. But I love Kurt Russell. When he and Carpenter got together, they made magic, and I can't I can't picture anyone else playing McCready like he did.
I know they originally wanted. Who was it that they originally? Because Russell wasn't going to do it because he had done. He was afraid that they were like, oh, he just did it right after Escape. I can't remember who they originally were going to get, and that whoever it was either couldn't do it or passed or whatever. So at the last minute, they were just like, "Hey, Kirk, you come do this." Which means A,
And
he already
man,
had that massive beard, or B, he can grow a beard at the snap of a finger because.
okay, apparently there were discussions with the studios about getting Christopher Walken, Jeff Bridges, Nick Nolte, Sam Shepard, also Tom Atkins and Jack Thompson, who are all really good contenders. They also apparently met with Brian Dennehy, Chris Christopherson, Tom Berenger, Scott Glenn, Fred Ward. Okay, so there was a lot of people considered for this,
Yeah.
and I think several of those guys would have done a pretty damn good job. But there's one McCready, and it's Kurt Russell.
Yeah, Bridges was the name I had. I couldn't remember, but yeah, Bridges was the name I heard because all I could think about was like, "Hey man," like he's the dude. Like, "Hey man."
Hey, you've
um,
done it, sure, but it's like, yeah, no, it's Kurt Russell.
and yeah, I was watching recently. I think it was on Dead Pit. They were talking about like their most hated movies, and one of the guys was like, "My most hated movie of all time is E.T." And, when you say that, people are like, "Oh, why?" He's like, "Because E.T. come out and it ruined the chances of the thing."
Yeah,
Everybody
and
loved
it,
E.T.,
and
so it ruined the thing.
and the failure of this, along with the failure of Big Trouble in Little China, which amazes me that it failed when it came out in the mid '80s, or what ends up leading to Prince of Darkness later on. Um,
Yeah, yeah, we could talk about the thing for. I do want to briefly touch on just real quick, and then we're out of the thing. The 2011 prequel. I know everybody calls it a remake, and then maybe in a lot of ways it kind of is. To me, it is a prequel.
it's a prequel. It
Um,
absolutely is a prequel.
what is your stance on that film?
Um, People have been extremely harsh with it. I will admit it's missing something because the CGI versus practical effects, the CGI in the movie, I can't lie, just isn't the best.
Yeah,
Overall, I really like it. I think it stands as a pretty good prequel. It falls well short of the original, but I wanted to see what unfolded in that Norwegian
mm-hmm.
camp because the prequel follows the events that leading up to the beginning of this movie and how Norwegian team discovers this alien craft and how it gets loose to their camp and how they react. It has some interesting ideas. It doesn't feel like an exact carbon copy of the 1982 version. I really like it. I think people are very unfairly harsh on it. I think had they gone with practical effects and really worked at getting the practical effects good instead of CGI, it would be remembered much more fondly. Also, anytime anybody tells me it was a remake, I question them if they've actually seen it.
Yeah,
Because again, it's not a remake.
yeah,
It is a much belated prequel. And interestingly enough, most of the time when somebody says that to me, they have not actually watched it. Uh, I think people need to give it a chance. You're going to have to overlook some shoddy CGI in parts, but some of the creature design in that is pretty great too, and I think it's got a pretty solid cast as well.
yeah. I like it. Like you said, the especially when you hear like they had done most of the creatures in camera and then they just kind of CGI'd over it. That's upsetting. Some of those creatures I'm not sure how, but I like that it doesn't. It's not a beat for beat. You know, you do get a blood test like thing because you have to do that. But I think they do it differently enough. I like that way they do it. We even talk about the blood test, which is like the greatest jump scare of all time for any movie. Period.
The-
Period.
Yeah,
Exclamation point.
yeah,
Um,
they figure out that if they expose the thing doesn't like fire, if they expose blood of potentially infected people to fire, it will react in some way. Which leads to one of my favorite scene in the movie is the blood test. Very influential scene, one of my favorite scenes from any movie, and one of the great horror movie scenes, I would say objectively, is the blood test scene. And man, it still makes me jump whenever it
yeah.
happens. And that scene goes crazy. It takes a turn so rapidly, and I love it.
Yeah, and the like you said prequel, 2011, the thing. We had Batman Begins by then. Just call it The Thing Begins. The only other thing besides the CGI is a little wonky, but no, it doesn't take you like nothing worse than what you'd have seen around that time. It is weird though for like no reason. They're like, what if we had all these great Norwegian actors speaking, for the most part Norwegian, but what if we just like threw a bunch of Americans in there?
Yes. Which little bit of issues continuity wise. It's like I really like Joel Edgerton and Mary Elizabeth Winstead in it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's doesn't quite line up with the original in that regard of it being a camp full of people from Norway. But I digress. I feel fortunate that we got that movie. Period. Given the fact it's 30 years afterwards, but I'm glad we got it. I enjoyed it. I think it's a good companion piece, as is the game. The game follows the events of the movie with a military team showing up to check out the facility, and antics ensue. I am pumped for the remaster of that game. That looks great.
Yeah.
It, Basically, if you want to see the best John Carpenter movie, watch The Thing. You want to see one of the horror, sci-fi, thriller greats, watch The Thing. You want to see how exactly to properly pull off practical effects that still hold up, it's The Thing. I love this movie. It's in my top three favorite movies of all time. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and it's always my go-to answer when somebody brings up that it's been a long time, but I used to be known as the guy who hated all remakes, and it's like, well, no, The Thing is the remake. Like, if you want to know how to make a great remake of film, this is it. This is the
Yes.
one. So yeah,
Also, I just want to
go ahead.
mention the tagline. The tagline being "Man is the warmest place to hide." Great tagline.
And yeah, I agree with you guys in chat. All the best movies are ravaged by critics.
I
Um,
I
it is
gotta pop
hilarious
away
going
for a
back
minute.
and
I'll be right back.
yeah, it is hilarious going back. And of course, we have time on our side, but I for the most part I really enjoy Ebert to a degree. I think he was a very insightful guy. Him and Siskel together. Well, I didn't agree with most of their stances on horror, because they seem to go out of their way a lot of times on horror films, especially the slasher genre. But man, if you go back and look at some of those times where Ebert just like really missed the mark on a review of a movie, man, like some of the movies he rakes over the coals, and then now you look back and like, oh, those are like considered some of the greatest movies of all time. Uh, The Thing and The Shining, being two of the biggest ones, and then for me is Blue Velvet. He hated Blue Velvet so much, even to the point where Siskel was like, "All right, take it down, Roger." But yeah, like I said, I love Ebert stuff. But man, when you go find some of the reviews of movies that are now considered some of the greatest films of all time that Ebert and them were just way off the mark on their reviews of how they were going to be perceived throughout history. It's incredible. All right, so yeah, like you said, we had The Thing. It did not do well. Um, he followed that up with Big Trouble in Little China, which, uh, again, did not do well and for anybody, which is blasphemous to say. And so after that, it was kind of Carpenter kind of walking away from the studios and going full blown independent again. And we head on to 1987 with Carpenter's Prince of Darkness. This one's actually written by John Carpenter. Stars Donald Pleasance, Victor Wong, Dennis Dunn coming over from Big Trouble. And then Alice Cooper, of course, as your favorite homeless man. And I did not grow up with this one, so we watched The Thing all the time. And then, of course, once we discovered In the Mouth of Madness, that movie was on constant rotation. Prince of Darkness got overlooked by me for a long time. Looking at it now, I know a lot of people say this is Carpenter's scariest movie, which I could see. I know we did our podcast episode over it. Amber and I kind of didn't really enjoy it that much. It was our first time viewing it. Going back, I think I enjoyed it a lot more. But to me, this isn't. To me, this is the weakest spot of the trilogy. Now, having said that, I'll make all the people who love Prince of Darkness really mad at me. But to break it down for you, so Prince of Darkness is about one day this nameless priest played by Donald Pleasance shows up at Victor Wong's quantum physics class and tells them he wants them to study this. What do you say Peacock calls it? Liquid Satan?
Yes, a vat of liquid Satan.
So it's what they're after the discovery of what they call the God particle. This is a liquid that is considered to be the liquid essence of the devil, aka the anti-God particle, because every in science every positive has a negative. And so they're studying it, and meanwhile there is some astrological anomalies going on. You have this cult-like group of homeless people not letting anybody in or out of this little monastery that's been found, where this is found in the basement. You also find out through a lot of exposition that there is a secret group called the Order of Sleep, I believe is what they are called.
Brotherhood of Sleep.
Brotherhood of Sleep, that's what it is. And all of our characters start getting these dreams, which aren't actually dreams, but they are broadcasts from the future, which we'll get into the filmmaking of that because of those. But they're being sent back as a warning to stop what's coming. Meanwhile, inside of the monastery, the juice is loose, so to speak. And so, one by one, we are dealing with possessed scientists. And this movie is, again, not my favorite in this trilogy, but kudos for like the biggest of swings. I think this may be Carpenter's biggest swing.
It is hands down his most ambitious movie. he went for it. And if any of you out there are wondering, boy, this movie kind of sounds convoluted and confusing, it's because it kind of is. Um, there's a lot of high concepts and ideas going on in this movie, melding, you know, religion and science. And what happens when religion and science meet a force from beyond the stars that has this huge, potentially huge life or world altering impact on things. And these group of people who are trying to understand it and deal with it. Ooh, this movie it goes for it, and it's a mixed bag. It really is. Um, I'm to find out it. Apparently, when John Carpenter wrote this, he was really like reading a lot of theoretical physics books and whatnot, and he kind of came up with a bunch of broad ideas and concepts, and a lot of which were left open to interpretation of the viewer. And watching it, I've seen Prince of Darkness a bunch of times now. You definitely, it makes more sense, and you pick up more after repeated viewings. Uh, I say the thing most anybody can enjoy it. The Prince of Darkness, it ain't for everybody. It's takes place after they get to this location, this abandoned church in L.A., which was actually filmed at an abandoned church in L.A. It it's restricted to that location, and craziness ensues. It is. This is a wild movie where it's kind of hard to predict what's going to happen next. It's crazy, and it's a movie. The more we're talking about it, it's a really hard to explain movie.
Yeah. So,
Oh,
no, go ahead.
there's a vat of green goo. That's the devil. People are trying to figure out stuff about it. It's infecting people. Yeah, it's weird. It's different.
I think to me that's what makes this one the most. I don't want to say polarizing because I mean, it's not really polarizing. It's just it's the hardest of the three to go back to. I feel because when this movie is giving you what you want in a Carpenter movie, man, it gives it to you. Whether it's the guy with the bugs, or the bicycle death, or when we're all running around just like spitting in each other's mouths. It's like the old every college student's like 43 years old. The big ending is like what you want. But a lot of this movies, man, is just people sitting in a room and we're just talking quantum mechanics. And then you get the people who, like I said, who really do like they just keep going into it and we're just explaining it. We have to keep reiterating what the theory about what this could be and what it means. And I compare it I compare it to people who have to explain to you what a concept album is. And I'm like, look, man, I like Welcome Home. I don't need to know all about Good Apollo, My Star is Burning for, and what the Keystone and the Maury War means. Just I like that song, and there's a couple of banger tracks on there. Like I don't need you to break it down for me. I don't need to know what was going on in the lore of Rush's 2112. Like I just want to hear Spirit of Radio. Like and I kind of feel like that's kind of how this movie is broken down, because when you do get that stuff that you are expecting from a Carpenter movie, I'm 100% like, this is fantastic. But then again, it's just a lot of like sitting around like, well, if this is a positive, then that's negative. So you have the God particle, so this must be the devil particle. Jesus was an alien who came to warn everybody about this anti like. But I will say, what to me, what makes this movie so memorable more than anything else are the dream stuff, because the way
Oh,
Carpenter films it, it's as close as you can get to like kind of filming what a real nightmare feels like. Because it's not play, it's not it's filmed like he like filmed it off of television, so it has this weird like staticky feel. It's Carpenter doing the lines, and it's just you're just looking at this doorway of this building. You hear like all this commotion, like there's cops and stuff behind camera. People are freaking out, and then you just see a shadowy figure moving in the doorway, which I think they said is kind of what it was based on. Deborah Hill had a nightmare about that image, about a dark figure coming out of the doorway, and so that's kind of where they took that scene from. All the dream stuff, that is to me what is the lasting parts of this movie. That, and then the mirror stuff in the end, which we'll get into. But otherwise, it's just a bunch of dudes sitting around talking about science. There is that great scene with Dennis Dunn, which is, I think, the first time we watched this movie. I think we read it in high school. Like, we were all sitting at
we
Shaw's
were,
house.
yes.
Um, and then I hadn't seen it until we did the podcast. But the scene where the line, "I gotta go to the bathroom," like I remember that more than anything that from that first watch. When he's hiding in the broom closet from the possessed people. Again, I really do. I think, like I said, now that seeing it a third time, I do appreciate it more, especially knowing like what Carpenter was doing in his career. And again, like just the swing to be like, fuck it, then I'm gonna make my own movie, and it's about science and the devil, and you know, quantum theory, and like fuck you Hollywood. I love that about the movie, and to me, I think that's what makes it so much fun. Plus, also just the idea of all three of the movies. This one is the most ambiguous of the endings, which I guess I don't know if the if you remember the trailer. The trailer, I don't know if it's like the original ending where you see something as opposed to the way the movie ends. But the way the movie ends with the main character, just Captain Mustache, like it's that real Inception like ending right before it's that ending that Carpenter's so good at. He's so good at that. I used to call it the third act ending. Him and Cronenberg both just give you that ending where you're like, no, 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 don't stop now, keep going. But I've ranted and raved. And number one, also, where else are you gonna go in 2024 during a John Carpenter retrospective and hear a Coheed and Cambria joke? So you're welcome, internet. Um, I will turn it over to you, Nick.
Uh, I think yes, there's a lot of exposition attempting to explain the very high concepts about what's going on in the movie, but I think it's interspersed with enough action, intrigue, and suspense that I think for the most part it works. I think this movie hits more than it misses, which you when I get to some of my criticisms, you may not think I feel that way. Uh, it's just there's nothing else quite like Prince of Darkness. I love that it has the feeling of one of Carpenter's earlier movies, Assault on Precinct 13. I love the idea of urban isolation. Of you are in a place in the middle of a city, surrounded by people. You might as well be on the moon because you're so far away from help. When this team of people goes into this church and they are surrounded by this really, I mean, a frightening group of homeless people with various homemade weapons, including Alice Cooper's incredibly badass bicycle spear. He impales a dude with this like homemade bicycle spear, and it's pretty awesome. Apparently, it was inspired by Alice Cooper's actual live show. And Alice Cooper's very excited to be in this movie, and I think the movie's better for his presence because he plays a killer homeless guy very well. Uh, I love the setting of the church. The church is properly creepy. It's just run down, and you have this room in this basement with the vat of green liquid. I actually think is a cool looking effect. It's a couple feet tall. It's a swirling black liquid, and it's crusty and decaying. But it's in this room with all these crosses and candles and this ancient tome, uh, and this book that's there, which is ancient and has all these it has like forms of mathematics that shouldn't even exist at that point. I love some of the lore behind this. At the Brotherhood of Sleep being these people that's guarding this container that contains this essence of evil. But yeah, as far as what really works, man, the dreams. And it's because each time it shows the dream, it's a little different because it's showing it as it goes throughout the movie in more detail, and you're seeing more. And that the creepiest part of the movie. And I remember when we first watched it, and that all hit us how creepy and unsettling that was to the voiceover, and where they're explaining that they're sending this message back through time from the year 1999, which is at this point a dozen years in the future. Uh, it's atmospheric as hell. I While there is exposition, I think it's actually pretty decently paced. The soundtrack, apparently a lot of it's like going back to Siskel and Ebert. Roger Ebert hated the music in this movie. It is signature Carpenter synthesizer music, and I don't know, it works. It's great. I think it adds a lot to the atmosphere of this movie. Uh, I know it's interesting. It's unique. Unfortunately, as we discussed, it's not without problems. There's too many damn characters in this movie. They throw a bunch of characters in, some of which we never really even know their name. They should have cut the cast in about half and fleshed out the characters they have more. Because a lot of them just aren't particularly interesting and just feel like they are absolutely thrown in there for no reason other than to contribute to the body count or to be another person that's turned into a zombie possessed person goo guy. I don't know. Uh, but to me, one of the glaring things in this movie, it's also a funny thing, but it is so completely out of place, is Walter, who's played by what's his name? Dunn.
Dennis Dunn.
Dennis Dunn, that's it.
Yeah.
He's thrown in there as this comic relief and holy it's like he's from an entirely different movie. It doesn't fit in the movie at all. He has these lines that are supposed to be funny, but they're delivered at weird times, and sometimes the lines he says don't even sound like they actually fit in the scene at all. Plus, I liked him in Big Trouble in Little China. He's just not good in this movie.
Yeah.
His line delivery is terrible, and he overacts. There's a part where he gets stuck in the closet, and he's freaking out and jumping around and like kicking the wall, and it's just like, what the hell are you doing? Uh, yeah, it's just there's moments like that really take me out of the movie at times. And I get, John Carpenter injects a lot of humor into his movies, and that's fine because even like The Thing has moments of humor. It doesn't work here. It just doesn't. And apparently, Carpenter, in his quest to leave things up to interpretation, makes it where this movie gets convoluted and confusing and real messy at times. As much as I enjoy it's one of the more flawed movies that I still really enjoy, and I would still give a good rating. Um, it's interesting, it's fascinating, and it's a mixed bag. Uh, But I will say the last 15 minutes of this movie are great.
Yeah.
The scenes involving the mirror are awesome, and there's a shot from inside the other side of the mirror when a character gets sucked in there. That is absolutely haunting. And I think the ending, great ending. I think it ends like it should. And, you know, oh, we thwarted the apocalypse. Did we though? Did we really?
Yeah, I think of all everything in this group of movies, this one is definitely the most shows you the least, but also what it gives you is like haunting. Like you said, like the dreams, just the figure in the doorway, the scene in the mirror where all you see is that red clawed hand. That's all you get, and just that is like, oh man. Um, or to my favorite part of this movie is the guy when you he's down below on in like the parking lot, and they realize it's just a bunch of bugs talking through a dead body.
Oh,
uh, it's so unnerving.
that is a fantastic scene worth the price of admission alone. He's like,
Yeah.
I've got a message for you, and you're not going to like it. But with that garbled, unnatural voice he has, I like the stuff that takes place outside with the angry army of hobos and that scene with the bugs. So there's a few scenes involving bugs that are just great, gross out scene as you see this evil force that's influencing everything around and having a profound impact in the immediate area around this church. Uh,
I will
if you want
also
something
say,
really,
oh, go ahead.
as I say, if you want something really different, you want something interesting, you like the idea of a melding of science and religion in a movie, it's worth watching. You may have to watch it more than once, and it's said it's an imperfect movie, definitely the weakest of the three, but one I still enjoy.
Oh yeah, it's like being like, yeah, it's the weakest of these. It's like an 8.5. Like, but I will say this, despite some of my problems with the movie, um, like this is one of this here that Siskel hated the score. Like this is, I don't know, man. This or Christine, like, are 1A, 1B for me on all time Carpenter scores. I love the score to this movie.
Wonderful and beautifully shot. And made this movie's made for only $3 million,
Yeah.
which for '86 still not much money to make a theatrically released movie. Interestingly enough, this was a lot more successful commercially than the thing too.
Yeah.
Made a lot more money, but then again, it had a much smaller budget to contend with, and it went on to have quite a life in home video. Uh, it and looking around researching this movie, apparently this is getting thrown around as one of Carpenter's best movies now by a bunch of people. That's a stretch. It is that's a stretch, but it's still a pretty solid Carpenter movie. It's bold, it's different, it's ambitious, and I can appreciate that he truly did something different here.
Yeah, like I said, if we're grading it on the scale of movies that are essentially John Carpenter giving the finger to Hollywood, then yes, this is his best movie of those films. But yeah, like you said, like the stuff I didn't think about it until like the second or third viewing of it. The claustrophobia of it, the isolation, which ironically is the theme that Carpenter comes around to every few years because you have Assault on Precinct 13, and then you have it kind of here where we're kind of doing Assault on Precinct 13 as things, and then much later in another movie that is nowhere near the caliber of any of these movies, and yet one that I cannot wait till we can finally sit down and talk about with Ghosts of Mars, aka Assault on Precinct in Space. Um,
Yes.
but no, I like I said, this isn't my favorite, but again, it is one that each time I watch it, I appreciate it. It grows on me more and more. It's you could say it is John Carpenter's like Chris Nolan movie. Like you got to watch it a couple times before you can really kind of appreciate it like you're supposed to. You have to let it marinate like overtime. You gotta keep dipping that toe back
You
in.
you really do. I just want to touch on. There's a message on the computer screen that I always liked. It said, "You will not be saved by the Holy Ghost. You will not be saved by the God plutonium. As in fact, you will not be saved."
Saved. Yeah.
That's great little thing thrown in there. A lot of nice touches in this movie. It's an enjoyable ride. And you said polarizing. No, I think it's absolutely a very polarizing movie. But for a Carpenter completionist, it's an absolute must.
Yeah. So we take a little bit of a break here. Again, this movie's a hit, and so we go into They Live, which is another one of Carpenter's best. Um, and then you skip ahead into Memoirs of an Invisible Man. And once again, we are sick and tired of the Hollywood system. So Carpenter steps away to a little studio called New Line, uh, and tackles 1994's, excuse me. I keep wanting to think this was 95. It is totally 94. Uh, In the Mouth of Madness, written by Michael DeLuca, who was one of the not founding, but like one of the main producers of the Freddy franchise. Um, Went on to be a studio head at several studios in his own right. Now I think he's like the co-head of films at Warner Brothers. And this is Carpenter's little take on his little homage to Lovecraft. Lovecraft meets what's the author? I was watching a thing about Carpenter about how he really he really like worshipped this author, the guy who wrote the Quartermass books.
Oh yes. Can I was looking,
And then
which I
like
forgot to mention. Which I forgot to mention. Nigel Neal.
yeah, who I guess I was watching a thing where they were talking about how like Carpenter loved his stuff, and then he was like just a hero of Carpenter's, and then Carpenter wanted him to write on something, and then the guy was like he didn't like Carpenter or Carpenter's stuff. I was like, yeah, another thing that has led Carpenter to kind of being a cantankerous old man. Don't meet your heroes, kids. But no, so I will let you take lead here with In the Mouth of Madness.
Real quick aside.
Yep.
The Quartermass or Quatermass. I can't. Prince of Darkness definitely bears some similarities to an older movie called Quatermass in the Pit, which was kind of a sci-fi horror movie made in the 50s or 60s in the UK, and the really great movie, and it kind of hits in a similar way. Uh, that'd be one. I wouldn't mind hitting some UK movies at some point in the future, but somebody pointed that out, and I've seen it both, Prince of Darkness and Quatermass in the Pit. Yeah, there's some definite similarities there, but a lot of inspiration from Nigel Neal. Well, In the Mouth of Madness, the movie that is probably the most legendary movie amongst our group of movie watching people in high school. Released in '94, and again, quite an ambitious project. So, see, where do I start with this? We follow a insurance investigator named John Trent, played by the fantastic Sam Neill. Fantastic. Nails this movie. As he is hired to figure out where a missing horror author named Sutter Kane has disappeared to. He's enlisted by his publishing company to either find him or find his works or verify where he's at and what's happened to him. Um, all the while, this Sutter Kane, this author, who's the most popular author on earth. He's the most iconic horror author ever in this movie. His new book is due to be released, and it appears to be literally driving people insane. His work has a profound effect on people psychologically and kind of appears physically as well. While John Trent, Sam Neill's character, is on the verge of taking this assignment, he's almost axed to death by a lunatic who was been profoundly affected by Sutter Kane's books. So he ends up going on a road trip to with a woman who works for the publishing company named Linda. They go to find his whereabouts, and they find a town that is a dead ringer for a fictional town in Sutter Kane's books. And they find out to their horror that some of the things in the books are all too real. And they peel away more and more and find out more and more and go deeper and deeper, well, into the mouth of madness. I feel any plot explanation we could give would sell short how interesting the plot is and how great this movie is. And it's just, I don't want to give away too much because, man, watching this story unfold and see what's happening is amazing. And I've seen it several times, and the magic is still there.
Yeah. Like I said, The Thing is my favorite Carpenter movie, hands down. But I have so many memories attached to this film, what it meant to us in high school, and what it continues to mean. It's a great little movie, especially when you think about 90s horror. How much, in a pre-Scream world, how much this movie stands out and stands above most of everything that was coming out at that time. You have this amazing cast, like you said. Sam Neill is perfect as this absolute, like, charming yet total prick, which in his line of work you have to be. You have the character Linda Stiles, who, Julie Carmen, who I have been absolutely in love with since the first time we ever watched Fright Night Part 2.
Oh, yeah, she's great.
You have Jurgen Prochnow, who is so scary in this movie, he scares the living daylights out of Vigo the Carpathian. And even Charlton Heston popping up, and probably the best role that Hayden Christensen has ever played. And again, this is totally Lovecraft. It's, this movie came out right around the time I was a little before I was discovering Stephen King at a way too young age. And so, like, I had that I still have that affinity for King. And so this is Red Mills, like, what if Stephen King, what if Derry was real? What if Castle Rock was a real place? And things started coming out of those books. And, it gives you this great, honestly, the first and third of the movie are really, or at least for sure the first part of this movie, it's just a down and out, like, fun kind of detective story with this little bit of horror twist, little supernatural twist to it. And then as the movie slowly evolves into where this movie goes toward the end, it just, again, this is the best, one of the best, if not the best, versions of a Lovecraft story played on screen that isn't a Lovecraft adaptation, and honestly is a better Lovecraft adaptation than some Lovecraft adaptations. Especially if you look at some of the stuff where Lovecraft kind of took over Chambers, the Yellow King, which we go back. Was it last Halloween a year ago? We did our H.P. Lovecraft episode. But the Yellow King, because that in the story of the Yellow King and the King in Yellow is what it's called, where it talks about this play that drives people insane and leads to madness, and we'll get into that here with our last review. But I think this is where we really hit on that, and again, just the Lovecraftness of this all, this little village, which totally feels like. Again, it feels like Derry. It feels like it could be Castle Rock. It feels like Arkham, Mass. Like, you expect to see Miskatonic University in the background of the Black Church, and just the iconography in this movie of the Black Church. It's just the most terrifying religious building I can think of ever. Like the most beautifully horrific looking church you'd ever want to visit, which is a real place. Supposedly, it's just like a real church with like a lot of like Russian Orthodox looks to it. I love the breakdown. I love the conversations that Styles and Neil have about reality and what is sanity, what is madness, and how quickly, the pendulum can swing from one to the other. And this is just a movie that from the minute we rented it to this very moment, I have just absolutely loved and adored this film.
You're right about it being a better Lovecraft adaptation than most Lovecraft adaptations have been. I look at Lovecraft adaptations of can they really capture the themes of cosmic horror beyond human comprehension, of having to horrifying realizations about who you are, about being overwhelmed by the sheer forces at work, worrying about losing your mind and being, going crazy. And this nails it. You're following along with this character as he starts questioning absolutely everything he knows because he's a very rational person and has his always knows there's a reasonable explanation for everything until he runs into situations of which there is absolutely no reasonable explanation. And you start seeing glimpses of that early on in the movie as you see the impact Sutter Kane's writings are having on the people. One very unsettling scene where he gets attacked by the guy in that cafe, and the guy looks at his eyes and he has two pupils in each eye and looks at him and delivers the line, "Do you read Sutter Kane?" And he delivers it in such a chilling way. Journey, the town they go to out of Sutter Kane's books is called Hobbs End. And the journey to Hobbs End is frightening. It's going on this road trip. There's a scene on the road where they keep on seeming to pass the same person on a bike over and over, and it just gets creepier. Yep, creepier every time. Really creeped me out, especially the first time I watched it.
So, do you want to tell them the story, or do you want me to tell it?
You go ahead.
So, to set the scene, we're watching this movie at my parents' house, and there was the movie room. Like, so upstairs there was one bedroom and then a little room to off of it. That was the movie room, and every week that's where we were watching movies. And so we're sitting there all together, crammed in, watching this movie one Sunday night. I don't know if it was everybody. It may have just been you and me for sure, and maybe Shaw, maybe.
I think it was Shaw and I want to say it was at least four of us.
Okay, so it may have been Lee then. It certainly wasn't Matt.
Yeah. No, I think it's me, you, Shaw, and Lee. I believe all four of us were there. If memory serves.
So it's dark. We're watching this movie because this was the early 2000s, and so we all had smallish televisions. And you just see they're driving down this lonely road, and there's this young kid on a bike, and he says he won't let me leave, and it's just the sound of, because he has playing cards attached to his tires, and so it's just that clickety click 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 sound, which is like to this day, if I hear that noise, it just unnerves me. But like you'll see him fade into the taillights, and then there's an old man, like we're just seeing this person on a bike over and over and over again. And as we're sitting there, I don't know what led to it. I don't want to say comedic genius because that seems stupid, but for whatever reason, there was like a fake slime, and it was dry, but it was just a stringy slime. I believe, if memory serves, it came with the Toad action figure from the first X-Men movie. So you could like cover Wolverine in the slime from Toad. And so we're sitting there, and Nick's sitting next to me on this futon, and I just kind of leaned over and was like, if I see that kid on that bicycle one more time, I swear to God, I'm going to vomit. And so sure enough, it's all dark. We're driving down this road. Clickety click click, clickety click click, clickety click click. He passes by, and I just lean over into Nick's lap and go, "Hah!" And I throw this into his lap. Oh man, it was beautiful.
I had a very animated reaction to that. I've always been a pretty jumpy person, especially in my younger years. It did not take much to set me off and make me jump. And it worked because I remember I was in the zone watching that scene. I was engrossed in this movie. And at this scene, the scene with the kid on the bike just creeped me the hell out. Then fake barfs in my lap, and I'm jumping harder, and everyone's dying laughing at me because it was hilarious. That's great. One of my favorite. This movie, watching this movie up in the movie room, and you all pranking me like that is one of my favorite memories of us watching movies. And us sitting up in the movie room watching it, we really felt collectively like this was something special. Like this was a movie that we were all so impressed with that it has left such a lasting effect on all of us. And that connection with our friendship, with being in high school, and our mutual appreciation for this movie are a big reason why it's also in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Uh, and it's just a really great movie. It is genuinely creepy and atmospheric and unsettling. And you get some really, really rad creature effects in here too. It's just this, have this idyllic little New England town where underneath the surface there are terrifying, horrible things at play. Down to these group of children running around that are chasing a dog, and that takes an incredibly creepy turn. And that church creeps me out so much. This gigantic church with these huge dark spires, just sitting out in this open field, is a place of pure evil. A lot of what makes this work is just an incredibly well shot movie. It's such a well put together, excellent movie. Carpenter. That's the thing for me. This is Carpenter's second best movie. The Thing's number one, and I would also give this one a 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10. It's just slightly behind The Thing because of how genius The Thing is. But holy cow, what a great movie!
This one of the three also to me has the most. Yeah, has the most, but also perfectly nails the humor because leading up to when things start going out of control, because this character that Sam Neill's playing is such just he's just this swarmy asshole. The scene with Jason I want to say Jason Todd, but that's Robin. Uh, the actor who's in a bunch of Carpenter movies. When
Bernie
he's
Ca- Bernie Bernie Casey.
no, the guy he's actually questioning. Um, because he's in They Live and he's in Ghosts of Mars. He's in a bunch of his movies. That scene when they're in that super sweaty, the guy who faked the fire. It's not Jason Frank. That's the Green Ranger.
That's power.
Yeah, whoever I can't remember his
Peter.
name.
We're talking about Peter Jason.
Peter Jason. Yes.
That's it.
That scene with him where he's grilling him and like it's just like the sweatiest a man has ever sweat before, and he's really charming and just funny in that scene. The one I kept coming back to was when they're driving, before things get scary. And there's just this weird moment where he opens his glove box while Styles is sleeping in the passenger seat. And like the only thing in his glove box is a bag of chips and like a bicycle horn that he uses to scare her while she's sleeping.
He's such a dick.
He is. But all that humor works, and the stuff with David Warner at the beginning with the Nut House, the bit with the Carpenters, the line about sorry about the balls, like just the humor in this movie works, and it works so well that when everything starts falling apart, like it really does. You are just with Sam Neill while his whole world is just spiraling into madness, and you're left with thinking like, I know I won't get into that theory because it is spoilery, but um, this doesn't quite have the effects don't have the same oomph as the thing, but like you said, the kids chasing the dog, and then later on you see a one-legged dog, and the kids have like bloody faces and weird teeth. The old lady and the old man
Oh man.
is just like, oh, and then uh the scene after the car wreck with the exorcist spider walk scene uh is just horrific looking. And that scene when he's in the bar yelling at Vigo the Carpathian about reality and what's reality, and he's talking about what's reality. He's like, my kid ate my wife, and then he like goes and he has that shotgun. And he's gonna kill himself, and he has that line because Samuel's like, "Don't do it." He's like, "I have to. He wrote me this way," and then blows his brains out. Is haunting stuff, and then that ending. The ending, which again has this twisted humor right up until the last second before we cut to credits, where Sam Neill is just laughing, 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 and then you realize like we're broken, and then credits start. Like he's about to just break into hysterical screaming, crying, but right before then you hit those credits. The one thing I will say is that as much as I praise everything about this movie, my one like maybe we should have redone that is this is kind of the beginning of Carpenter's less synthy, more chuggy guitar uh, compositions, and it feels really weird for this movie.
It's I forgot. It's like starting early on in the movie. We get this like metal soundtrack. It sounds cool. It just doesn't exactly fit a lot of the time, but
No, it's a good
yeah, I keep
track, and when you hear the opening riff, it's a good track. But knowing where we're going, you just like what? It doesn't really set you for the ride this movie's gonna take you on. Like I want a good. This movie really needed a deep, dark Carpenter Hallworth type of score. But
at
yeah,
the
I
end of the
agree with you.
day,
It's my number two Carpenter.
it's and it feels apocalyptic, especially as you get towards the end of the movie. You get the impression that things are definitely not going to be okay, and like there's a part where it's like he can hear like on a radio of the things that are happening in the world, and it sounds like a particularly terrifying apocalypse. Um,
That's the other thing too. Is this is the one of the three where you actually are seeing what that film's apocalypse looks like. Um, because you have the part with at the end during the next day. You aren't see you don't see cities burning and lakes of fire, but you see enough to know that whatever the fear of happening was, it's happening now. We are in it now. It's not like
yes,
whereas the Thing and Prince of Darkness kind of give you the ambiguous of like, could it? Is it? It could be. We don't know. This movie is definitely like, oh no, we're done. So like, it's game over. Which is interesting and kind of fitting if you think about this as a trilogy. And for the longest time, and for most people, it is. But that's why we have added on our last thing before I get to. Do you have anything else for In the Mouth of Madness? I don't want to cut you off before you.
I it's another one that I we could sit here analyzing it and breaking it down for a long time. It's funny that Sam Neill was in this, and he was also in Jurassic Park within a year of each other because they're such drastically different movies.
Well, that he's like what 2 years removed from like something like Dead Calm, which
Yeah,
again is a wholly different movie than either one of those other two. God, I love Sam Neill. One of
Nancy.
these times we'll have to just. I don't know if we can do a whole Sam Neill episode, but I definitely at some point want to talk about Possession
Yes,
because
I agree.
what a ride.
There's some man.
And so yeah, that was the Apocalypse trilogy, and it was and is and all that will be Carpenter's little encapsulated look at the end of the world in these three different movies, three different it's kind of three different genre type movies. You have one that is a horror sci-fi, you have one that is very much a theological uh I can't remember the word I'm looking for type of movie, and then you have this that's very meta cosmic horror type things, but I don't remember where it came up. And just in passing, it was one of those things like you heard like as you drifted off to sleep, just a kernel of in passing somebody being like somebody was talking about the Masters of Horror films, which that's what we're going to talk about. His first episode that he did of the Masters of Horror series, which is a series. And again, we could all sit down here and write down. At some point, we need to write down just like episode or live ideas. I would like to revisit this series because in a time now where you've have and had so many great anthology TV shows, whether it's Shudder has Creep Show. There is American Horror Story. So many great anthologies. I would like to go back and look at the Masters of Horror in its entirety, but I was watching something, they were talking about the Masters of Horror, and just in passing, somebody went, well, it kind of fits in Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy. Just in, just a throwaway line. It kind of fits. And I was like, no, Carpenter it's the Apocalypse trilogy, idiot. You can't have 4 movies. But that little nugget of an idea stuck with me. And it just kept growing and growing. Thinking about it, not necessarily rewatching the episode, but just kind of playing the episode, what happens in that 1 hour movie through my mind, has led me to the theory that, yeah, I do believe Cigarette Burns is the unofficial 4th entry in his Apocalypse trilogy. So the series coming out in 2005, it was on Showtime. Masters of Horror was a 1 hour. It was essentially a 1 hour movie each week, where each episode was given to a quote unquote master of horror, a famous horror movie director, and they were given carte blanche with a set budget. Here's this money. We have an hour. Whatever you want. It's on Showtime. Nothing's off the table. Whatever you can do for this amount of money, do it. Do whatever you want. You get good, you get bad. But I think most people agree that, sadly, some people say that In the Mouth of Madness was Carpenter's last great movie. Some people would say it's his last good movie, but they're wrong. Again, I haven't seen The Ward since it came out in 2008, I think is when The Ward came out.
It was 2010, but I might be wrong.
2010, somewhere around there. Again, this may be his last great movie. I don't know how you think about it. But yeah, I want to try to do my best to get you on the notion that this is the fourth entry in the Apocalypse trilogy. We have his episode was episode 8 of that first season, Cigarette Burns. It was written by Drew McWeeny and Rebecca Swan. Fun fact, if you listen to the music, you think, man, that really sounds like a Carpenter score. It is. It's Cody Carpenter's first composing credit. So his son, who he plays music with now when he's not playing the Xbox, and just, I assume, sitting in a dark room, just smoking cigarettes for at least 3 hours a day, which I feel is part of his daily routine. Side tangent before we get into this, did you see that there was somebody, I don't think it was him, it ended up not being him, but somebody, made a fake John Carpenter Twitter account, and of course now you can pay to be verified, so they were verified, and then was posted about what's Letterboxd, and then started writing all these negative Letterboxd reviews for movies about how much they suck, because he's reviewing these movies as John Carpenter. Hilarious stuff. Sometimes the internet wins. But, because I just imagine, again, John Carpenter sitting in a room, smoking a cigarette, being like, Tenet, I don't get it. Fuck that movie. But back to the movie at hand, Cigarette Burns. It stars a pre-Walking Dead Norman Reedus when he was just that one guy from the Boondock Saints. And one of the creepiest yet fabulous actors to ever grace any horror film he's in, Udo Kier, who we showed it to Ashton. It was his first episode of, he'd never seen the show, and so we watched it. He was like, that guy is something else, and I was like, buddy, you don't even know the half of it. And what it centers around, it's kind of like a mix between a continuation, like another take on In the Mouth of Madness, mixed with Polanski's The Ninth Gate, which is kind of an underrated movie that I kind of should go back and revisit. I kind of remember liking a lot, despite all the trouble surrounding the filmmaker, now actor as well. Where we have, how about said Daryl Dixon, where we have Norman Reedus, who is he's kind of a collector of lost films, and he has some back alley channels able to procure things for people for money. He also runs this small art house theater that just shows random old horror movies, which to somebody like me sounds just awesome. The movie opens and they're showing an Argento double feature with Deep Red, and I can't remember what the other movie is. And he is dealing with a lot. He's dealing with the fact that his girlfriend, fiance, he's dealing with her passing, and her father, who he loaned money from to open the theater, is not only grief stricken, but has turned that grief into anger toward our our main character here, and he is hired by a very rich Udo Kier to find a notorious lost film, Le Fin du Monde, The Fin Absolute du Monde, which is French for The Absolute End of the World, which is a movie that played once at a film festival, and most of the people who saw it there that night died. There was acts of violence and fires and just outright raving insanity, and the film is believed to be lost. And then the movie very quickly tells you that we are dealing with supernatural, because we are introduced to kind of the main image of the film, of the actual story, the cigarette burn story, outside of the what the cigarette burn is, and it is a trapped angel, um, and that he says his soul is tethered to the film, so as long as he is alive, the film still is existing. And then it's just a race around the world trying to find this lost film. And we run into uh, some very bizarre encounters, weird French historians, insane film critics. The supporting cast of 8mm pops up at one point.
Nope.
Leading to probably one of Carpenter outside of one of Carpenter's darkest endings. Like, this movie is, for an hour of television, it is dark. It is some dark material. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of it, I'll let you kick in your initial thoughts on cigarette burns.
I mentioned to you earlier, I watched this. It's the last time I watched this was when I was deployed to Iraq way back in 2007 or 2008. I don't remember which year it was when I watched this. On the bootleg DVD I bought there at a bazaar. Watched a bunch of these, and two of the Masters of Horrors episodes really stuck with me, and it was Cigarette Burns and Jennifer. I was pretty impressed by how how much this went for it for something being shown on TV and it's being an hour long movie. Uh, it's bold, it's very unsettling, and it's very gruesome. Uh, it does a lot with a short running time, and it does a lot with a fairly low budget. You hear so much of this movie of referencing you see only very tiny bits of this lost movie that Norman Reedus's character is pursuing. You see the effect it has had on people who have witnessed it, or even people who have been close to it, and the absolute insanity and madness and violence it imparts into people. And every step of the way, as Norman Reedus's character gets closer and closer to finally getting his hands on this movie, you see this sense of danger and depravity increases. And whew, the last 15 minutes of this movie is unflinching, brutal, and it's pretty shocking in parts. The movie I would compare it to in terms of just having a hard hitting last act is The Night Flyer. This hits me. It's just like, man, this one, it goes for it. I love this idea of there being a cursed movie that has it was such a affront to God and good that it's just this evil artifact that corrupts absolutely everything upon it, and especially anybody who happens to view it. And I know it's been used as a plot device before of having this cursed object that just corrupts all around it, but executed very well here. Uh, and the idea, we love movies, and it's just like the idea of like this movie that very few people have seen, and it's only been shown once, and you want to be one of the few people to actually see it. I find to be intriguing. I love the idea of the lost movies, and maybe someday finding them. It's like I want to see The Day the Clown Cried. Jerry Lewis's lost, terrible Holocaust comedy from the '70s, not because it's going to be a great movie. It's because it's the legendary reputation it has, and you can feel in this movie how the characters are salivating at just the chance to view this disturbing, awful movie. And yeah, it works on a low budget, on a short running time. This movie works. It's very effective.
Yeah, this is the one, much like in the Mouth of Madness, to me, has a lot more of Lovecraft than the other ones. Mostly because this one's the one that I brought up a little earlier. This one has the most that ties into the Yellow King. Because if you read the King Chalmers, the King in Yellow, it's about this notorious play that if you see this play acted, or if you act out this play, leads to death and mayhem. And at the behind all of it is this mysterious figure who once Lovecraft kind of takes the character and then the places like Carcosa and all that stuff, reshapes it in his way as this elder god who like uses this play to kind of bring about the end of the world. And you know, again, even with the title of the film, the absolute end of the world is this idea for this movie. And when this movie ends, you could look at it as maybe hopeful, but there's nothing in this movie that kind of gives you, even when the movie ends up where it ends up, you're still like, oh, maybe now we really are cooked. Um, but this one hits hard, especially like you said, as somebody who's a fan of movies. For me personally, as somebody who collects physical media, that that itch, that FOMO itch, where you're just like, I gotta have it. And yeah, just like idea of the lost film. There's this rumor going around now that November 1st is supposed to be the announcement that Vinegar Syndrome got their hands, and I finally got the approval to do a 4K restoration of The Keep, Michael Mann's The Keep, and possibly get that director's cut. And so, as somebody who's never actually has seen The Keep once on like a ratty VHS, because that's literally the only way you can watch it. But just that idea of like, oh, I have to have it. Like I need it. Now, granted, The Keep isn't gonna like fuse your hand together or make you try to feed your intestines to a film projector or anything like that. Which, good God Almighty, that the ending of this thing and Udo Kier's performance, his performance mixed with the sound design of that monologue he gives before that ending, good gracious, it will stand every hair on your body straight up. It is so unnerving. And yeah, of course, this term cigarette burns is wholly a movie thing. Like the best way to describe what a cigarette burn is to tell you there's that scene from Fight Club where they explain what it is. But on old film, it was where there would be a little circle that would flash in the top right corner of a film reel to tell the projectionist, hey, switch the reels. And I love that the opening of this thing where you have the guy, that actor who's like been in 1,000 things. I always think of him as the weird. He's in, he has a cool death in Jason versus Freddy in the cornfield. Where his film collection is he takes those movies and he snips out the he snips out the cigarette burn, because if you're watching the movie knowing what a cigarette burn is, if you're not the projectionist, usually you know when you see that something's about to happen. That's why we're changing the reels before the third act hits. And him removing that leads the movie to chaos, because now you don't know what's going to happen when. And which is kind of the metaphor for this movie. And as these characters are slowly getting closer and closer to this film, they start seeing these cigarette burns. They start losing time and waking up in violence, um, in the aftermath of violence. And to me, the scene where he finally meets the filmmaker's widow, and she tells him all this stuff about the guy and how he wasn't, what led up to his death in the film. And he's like, man, that's, yeah, so like, can I see it? And just the look on her face of like, you're doomed. Like,
Yeah.
you can't be saved. And again, that ending, knowing with how Norman Reedus can end his suffering, but knowing also that with that ending, that if that you may have well given the keys to the end of the world to the people who are ready for it, now that they are freed from their binds. And it's just so much that he puts into this one little hour TV movie. And for me, I like I said, it for me, everything he does in the film, everything he covers, the story, the imagery of it, totally fits in line with everything that these three Carpenter movies. What ties them together ties them to this for me.
It's an enjoyable little piece, and it kind of sucks it's been lost in the shuffle with a lot of other John Carpenter's works, because it's definitely worth revisiting. Uh, Udo Kier, of course, extremely unsettling, and man, I said it really goes off the rails, and there's some very disturbing scenes. The snuff film scene, it's said like straight out of 8 millimeter, it's rough.
Yeah.
It's I can't believe just how much they went for it in this movie, but I'm glad they did. Definitely not for all tastes, but if you want some unflinching Carpenter to kind of an interesting look on the world of film and lost film, it's definitely worth a watch.
And shameless plug incoming. If you want to know about a kind of an underlooked Carpenter movie as of itself, if you go right now, and not right now, after we're done, uh, go check out our YouTube channel. The last review up for this month, we were doing the Lost Carpenter anthology pilot for TV, Body Bags, which actually has Carpenter himself starring, and it kind of looks like Carpenter maybe having the most fun he's ever had in his entire life.
Oh yeah, he's having a ball in that movie.
Um, so go watch that as well. But definitely check out all four of these, because again, it's just for not only for these four movies to be what they are, but for the same guy to make them at like vastly different stages in his career through decades, is kind of a miracle that it happened. And amazing. We get these four individual horror, I don't want to say masterpieces, but unless you can think of another word, uh, that from the same guy again over over 20 years, is incredibly impressive.
there, and you get a good variety of these four films too. It's each one is distinctly different from the other, and I can appreciate that how many different things he did among these four movies. It's it's an impressive achievement of a legendary career to have this many great movies. I mean, just a few absolute masterpieces, especially of the genres. A lot of fun revisiting these, and I'll be revisiting them more and more for the rest of my life because I love these movies. Even Prince of Darkness, which is flawed, I still enjoy it, and I still look forward to watching it again. Um, Gotta watch one man watch The Thing.
Yeah.
It's such a killer movie, and In the Mouth of Madness is a wild ride that it's getting the recognition it deserves finally. But man, it's like nothing else, and I can appreciate that. I'm gonna appreciate how John Carpenter made so many unique movies, such a wide variety of subjects, and just nailed it so many times.
Yeah.
And all these movies do. Uh, they feel very apocalyptically. You get a front row seat to the beginning of the end of the world.
Yeah, it's man, and then just like I said, we'll get to it when we eventually do that Carpenter full retrospective. But man, just like if you like horror movies, he's got to be in your top three. Like there's no one else
Have to
that
be.
had the run he had. One of the best to do it. So I guess that's gonna wrap up this look at the Apocalypse trilogy. Or I guess now let's get it started here, all of you. We're gonna call the John Carpenter's Apocalypse quadrilogy because that's a fun word, and it's very mathy sounding, very smarty sounding, like for it fits in with Prince of Darkness, the Apocalypse quadrilogy. Um, but no, so let's see, what can we plug here? Coming up this Sunday is actually going to be our final Halloween Horror Month episode. We are looking at what is by film snobs to be called the greatest anthology movie ever made. And you'll get to hear my thoughts on whether or not that's true. We're talking about the Japanese film Kwai-Don from the 1960s. So it's going to be an interesting review there. And then we're heading right into, honestly, my favorite month for theme month. It's Neo Noir November. So I guess I'll go ahead and give you a spoiler. The first up is the 1970s spy noir with Roy Scheider called Last Embrace is what we're going to be looking at first. And then next month, boy howdy, if you want some homework for next month's live, I have a real simple thing. We're just doing some movie reviews. We're each picking 3 movies. We're going to watch them and review them for you and talk about them. But we are going to revisit some 2000s comedies. Do they hold up? We're going to find all that out. So my homework for you is to not only watch some 2000s comedies, get on Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, whatever music you listen to, app you're using, and just download Eve Six's second album, Horoscope, and it will put you right in the mood for the early 2000s mood we're going for. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Do you want to go ahead and tell them what movies we're talking about next month?
Oh, which movies?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm down.
All right. So
So
go ahead.
I picked. We each picked 3. I picked Wet Hot American Summer, Drop Dead Gorgeous, and Saving Silverman.
And since Saving Silverman was also on my list, I had to pivot. So my picks were Death to Smoochie, Out Cold, and what was my other one? My brain stopped. Oh, High Fidelity. Yes, yes. Another weird entry in movie club classics. The John Cusack film High Fidelity. So it's going to be a wild ride of 2000s comedies. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of reminiscing. Some first time views for both of us. There's one I know that
Yes.
you haven't seen, and there's one on this list that I haven't seen. So I'm really excited to dig into them. So you're not going to want to miss that. When we have a date set for that, we will let you guys know. Of course, usually we do that through our Facebook page. I try to make some fun videos up. I try to put them on TikTok, but they don't do as well. Something with the music, I'm not sure. I need to get better about like doing stuff on YouTube to promote them. But we're working on that. But otherwise, do you have anything else to talk about before we go ahead and let you get out of here?
Oh, I appreciate all you all joining us, and yeah, I hope to see you all more in the future. I really enjoyed watching these, and give these a shot. You'll enjoy watching them too.
Absolutely. Don't, even though it's still supposed to be in the 80s next week, in November here in Oklahoma, turn your air conditioner down low, throw on a coat, and watch the thing. You will not regret it. Until next time, I've been Jason,
I'm Nick.
and we will see you guys next time.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye, pal.